The moving truck groaned away from the curb at dusk. Cardboard scraped her palms as she sealed the last box. The house, once loud with dinners and plans, held its breath. Empty nail holes dotted the walls like tired constellations. Linda Cooper stood in the doorway and did not wave. Somewhere on the kitchen counter, a ring-shaped shadow lingered. She avoided looking at it, like avoiding a mirror. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and endings. Her heartbeat synced with the ticking of the thermostat. She reached for the lights, then left them on. Friends had suggested a fresh start would feel brave. Tonight it only felt like failure wrapped in tape. Her phone buzzed with a final unread message. She silenced it, afraid of more careful condolences. She wanted quiet large enough to hide inside. She lifted the object that mattered more than anything, her mother's old sewing machine, chipped and stubborn. It was heavy, all metal and memory and humming ghosts. She strapped it gently into the passenger seat. It was the most important thing she took. In the driveway, the evening wind lifted her hair. A dog barked 2 houses down, then gave up. A neighbor waved, unsure whether to smile or not. Linda nodded, practicing the shape of goodbye. The door clicked behind her like a period. The car smelled like coffee and new rubber mats. Boxes filled the backseat with unspoken sentences. She checked the mirrors, then her face, then nothing. A single map pin glowed on her phone. Port Harmony. She whispered the name as if tasting a dare. The engine caught, steady and impersonal and kind. She backed into the street, not trusting her hands. The house receded to a pale rectangle of light. Tears pricked, but she did not let them fall. Ahead, the highway promised miles of unstitched sky. Night unrolled like fabric across the interstate. Tail lights stitched red dashes through the dark. Semis breathed beside her like tired mechanical beasts. She kept both hands high on the wheel. The machine on the seat hummed only in memory. Exit signs surfaced like brief, green invitations. Linda passed them, counting miles instead of thoughts. The radio offered songs she could not swallow. She turned it off and listened to herself breathing. Silence became a passenger who would not sleep. Somewhere after midnight, hunger knocked politely. A lone diner promised coffee and mercy. She parked beneath a flickering neon spoon. Inside, the waitress poured without asking questions. Steam fogged her glasses and gentled her pulse. "Where you headed?" the woman asked. Soft. "South," Linda said, then added, "Port Harmony." The name felt unlikely and brave in her mouth. "Good air down there," the waitress smiled. "Good air helps people remember their lungs." Back on the road, she sampled the thought. Good air, good lungs, a place to breathe. Breath became a metronome for small courage. She timed it to the whir of tires. Inhale, exhale, survive this mile. Dawn found her with salt on the wind. The horizon lifted a thin line of pewter. Pelicans skimmed the suggestion of water. A weathered billboard welcomed her by name. Not hers, the town's, but it still counted. She pulled into a gas station by the marsh. A hand-painted flyer offered a backroom rental. Quiet tenant preferred. Cash okay. She wrote the number with shaking fingers. The ocean breathed like something patient and old. The landlord's house leaned into its own history. Peeling paint curled like tiny seashells. He led her down a narrow side path. A single door waited behind hibiscus leaves. "This is the room," he said, unlocking gently. It smelled of dust, cedar, and forgotten afternoons. A small window squared a slice of sky. Floorboards creaked with opinions and secrets. There was a plug near a wobbly table. There was enough space to begin. Money was a shy animal in her wallet. She counted it twice, then handed it over. The key was cold and unbeautiful in her palm. Still, it clicked like a promise when turned. Ownership, even rented, tasted like rain. She carried the sewing machine inside alone, set it on the table like setting a prayer. The metal gleam steadied her shoulders. She wiped the dust with an old shirt. The cloth darkened, and the room brightened. Her first stitches were on her own jeans. A frayed knee, a threadbare hem, small things. The rhythm returned like a melody remembered. Pedal, needle, feed dogs, breath, repeat. Her pulse matched the rise of the needle. A moth drifted through the window screen. Sunlight found the silver wheel and crowned it. She mended a button with careful tenderness. Every knot felt like saying her new name. Every snip sounded like trimming sorrow. Footsteps paused outside the garden gate. A silhouette hovered beyond hibiscus leaves. Someone cleared a throat, unsure and hopeful. Linda set down the scissors and listened. The future knocked with a careful knuckle. The neighbor was small, bright, and 80. She held a floral dress like a flag. "Could you make it kinder to my shoulders?" Her voice trembled with a party on Saturday. Linda felt the old panic tap her ribs. Hands remember, even when courage forgets. She measured, pinned, and breathed slow. The machine thrummed like a distant lullaby. Fabry agreed to her fingers with relief. The hem found a new, dignified horizon. They shared tea while the dress settled. Stories marched out between sips and pauses. Widowhood, garden pests, grandchildren's tall demands. Linda laughed once, surprised by the sound. It felt like a door opening from inside. Payment came as cash and peaches. The woman insisted on both, fierce and kind. People need to know you are here. She patted Linda's arm like sealing a seam. Word of mouth walked faster than mail. By sundown, 2 more knocks arrived. A work shirt needing a second chance. A choir robe tired of being tight. She said yes, carefully, to each. The table learned the weight of trust. That night, she counted folded garments. She also counted breaths not full of grief. Progress was small, stubborn, and visible. She set a jar for future rent. Coins clinked like tiny rounds of applause. Outside, sea air pressed against the screen. She listened to gulls negotiating the dark. The machine rested, warm under her towel. Tomorrow, someone else might find the door. Tomorrow, she might answer faster. Morning arrived with low clouds and mercy. Linda brewed coffee, strong enough for doubt. Appointments had been scribbled on a paper bag. Names, sizes, little notes about smiles. She liked writing the word ready. People brought more than fabric to the table. They brought funerals, anniversaries, job interviews. They brought shame about changes in their bodies. They brought photographs folded to softness. They left lighter than they came. Listening can tug at a tender seam. Midday, Linda felt the ache of stories. Her chest tightened at a mother's silence. She stitched, slower, steadier, kinder. Tears pricked but did not spill. A man asked for a patch over a scar. Not his skin, his jacket from deployment. She matched a thread the color of resolve, sewed a small star inside the lining. He nodded, eyes bright as wet steel. Purpose rose like steam from the kettle. The room seemed larger than its corners. She noticed her hands had stopped shaking. She noticed she was humming again. Humming was a kind of permission. As evening softened, she closed the window. A final customer left with careful gratitude. Alone, she studied the quieted machine. Something waited, tucked where courage sleeps. A box she had not opened in years. She set it on the table, breath held, tape brittle, marker faded to ghost. Inside, photographs rustled like dry leaves, and a dress the color of vows. Tomorrow, she would decide its future. The box sat on the table, breathing dust and history. Linda peeled the old tape carefully, as if touching skin. Inside were snapshots of a younger woman she barely knew. Her smile then had been loud, unafraid, full of plans. Now it looked like someone else's borrowed light. Beneath the photos lay the wedding dress she had sewn. The fabric still whispered secrets of that summer afternoon. Its lace had yellowed, but the seams held perfectly. Her fingers traced the hem that once brushed hope. Each stitch was a promise she could not keep. She spread it across the table like a confession. The silence around her seemed to hold its breath. Memories rose, vows, laughter, that last slammed door. For a moment she nearly folded it back again. But something stronger than grief held her still. Maybe you can be something else, she murmured. Scissors gleamed in her trembling hand. The first cut sounded louder than thunder. She closed her eyes, let the sound finish speaking. When she opened them, she felt lighter by half. Hours passed in a quiet storm of fabric and tears. Pieces of the dress became new shapes, new beginnings. A scarf, a pillow cover, a line of delicate trim. Every creation reclaimed a fragment of herself. Redemption was patient, made of thread and breath. At dawn, she looked at what remained. A single sleeve. She folded it gently and placed it near the window. The light slid through it like forgiveness. It was not beauty yet, but it was becoming. And so, she thought, was she. When she slept, the machine hummed in dreams. Her mother's voice floated between the stitches. Don't waste what can be mended, Linda. Ha! She smiled in her sleep, fingers twitching slightly. The night sewed her into a gentler tomorrow. By morning, the room had a pulse of its own. Sunlight rested on fabric like a promise kept. Linda rearranged the space with deliberate grace. Each spool, each folded cloth felt like intention. She named the place quietly, the Workshop of Hope. Neighbors began bringing donations of fabric scraps. Children peeked through the doorway, curious and shy. Someone offered to paint a small wooden sign. Her laughter returned, surprised but certain. The air itself smelled different, like becoming. She experimented with recycled materials and texture. Old denim from fishermen, curtains from closed motels. She stitched them into jackets and skirts with stories. Each piece felt alive, stitched with its own heartbeat. Imperfection became her signature of truth. Word spread faster than she expected. A teacher asked for aprons for her students. A bride wanted something made with soul. Linda stayed up late, music low, heart steady. Work no longer drained her. It rebuilt her. Some nights she paused to write tiny notes. She slipped them secretly into finished garments. Keep going. You are stronger than you know. Simple words, invisible stitches of kindness. She imagined strangers reading them years later. On Sundays, she opened her door for tea. Women gathered, sewing, laughing, remembering. It was not a store. It was a circle of healing. Stories mingled with the sound of thread. The walls began to glow with belonging. When she closed the shop at dusk, she lingered, hands resting on the table. She whispered thanks. This room, once her hiding place, had become her heart. Outside, the sky wore a calm shade of courage. Inside, she believed in mornings again. It came quietly, as doubts often do. A man in a crisp shirt and practiced smile. He said her name like punctuation, not music. I knew your husband, he began smoothly. Linda's stomach tightened around the memory. He spoke of opportunity, of investors, of scale. Her creations could be more than this, he said. A factory in Dallas, online sales, proper branding. He made success sound like rescue disguised as math. Part of her wanted to believe every polished word. At home, she stared at the neat stack of contracts. Numbers swam before her eyes like restless fish. Profit looked heavy beside the price of peace. She could almost hear the machine holding its breath. Was ambition worth surrendering the quiet she'd earned? Sleep evaded her that night, replaced by arithmetic. What if growth meant losing her hands, tenderness? What if it meant debt, dependence, disappointment again? She pictured her ex-husband's smirk in business meetings. That thought alone snapped something invisible inside her. The next morning, she met the man at the cafe. He smiled, already expecting her signature. Instead, she slid the papers back across the table. My work doesn't need rescuing, she said softly. His smile faltered like a button losing thread. Walking home, the wind carried a hint of salt. She breathed it in, deep and deliberate. Saying no had its own kind of weight and grace. Power didn't roar. Sometimes it whispered. She finally liked the sound of her own quiet. Back at the workshop, the machine greeted her. She pressed her hand to its metal shoulder. Just you and me, she said with relief. It answered in the only language it knew, motion, and the room filled again with the sound of courage. The day began with too much coffee and optimism. Orders filled the table, fabric spilling like water. Linda hummed as she worked through the morning. Then, a snap, sharp, metallic, final. The needle broke mid-stitch and pierced her thumb. Blood bloomed bright against the pale cotton. Pain flashed quick, not deep, but symbolic. She sat down hard, clutching her hand in pride. The room fell silent except for her pulse. It sounded like disappointment disguised as thunder. She cleaned the wound, replaced the needle, but rhythm had abandoned her entirely. Every hum of the motor now felt accusing. She turned the machine off and stared at nothing. The quiet became a weight she could not lift. For 3 days, she didn't open the door. Phone calls piled up like folded regrets. Her reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar. Was this all too fragile to last? Maybe hope, like thread, wears thin over time. On the 4th morning, a letter waited outside, a simple envelope, no return address. Inside, a note written in uneven blue ink. You fixed my dress, and somehow, me too. Linda read it twice, then a 3rd time, trembling. She pinned the letter above the table carefully. It fluttered each time she passed, like applause. Her eyes blurred, but she smiled anyway. Some stitches are invisible, but they hold best. She turned the power switch back on. When the machine purred again, she joined softly. Pedal, breath, thread, familiar, forgiving, firm. Her thumb ached, but her heart didn't. Philia had tried to visit and been turned away. By dusk, the workshop was singing again. The invitation arrived folded in gold and doubt. A community fair in Port Harmony, featuring artisans. Would you show your collection? The letter asked. Linda's hands trembled with a mix of pride and fear. She whispered, yes, before courage could change its mind. For weeks she worked long into the blue hours. She designed a new line called Beautiful Scars. Each piece used imperfect fabrics, torn and reborn. She stitched stories of loss into patterns of hope. Her seams carried the rhythm of second chances. On the morning of the fair, her nerves buzzed. The booth was small, but alive with color. Locals touched the garments like holding confessions. Every praise felt heavier than she expected. Every smile was a thread pulled tight with meaning. A young journalist approached with a notebook. "Your work feels like therapy," she said gently. Linda laughed, surprised by the word's truth. "Maybe it's cheaper than one," she answered. They spoke until the afternoon turned gold. The article appeared a week later online. "The Woman Who Sews Stories," the headline read. Photos of her pieces, her smile, her little shop. Orders arrived from cities she'd never seen. Success, once a ghost, now knocked politely. She worked harder than ever, afraid to falter. Fabric towered, deadlines circled like gulls, yet somewhere beneath the noise, she missed the stillness. Growth can be both gift and thief, she realized. She longed for the quiet hum that had started it all. That night, before turning off the lights, she paused. The machine gleamed, loyal and waiting. She touched its metal side like an old friend. "Don't let me forget why I began," she whispered. The silence answered, steady and kind. The headline ricocheted across her phone at dawn. "The Woman Who Sews Stories" glowed in patient serif. Comments piled like seashells, each with a small wish. Orders stacked in her inbox, bright with urgency. Linda breathed, then breathed again, anchoring the room. That week, the bell over the door never rested. Teenagers held denim-like declarations of identity. Grandmothers brought quilts, asking for gentle repairs. A man wanted courage stitched into his cuffs. She tried to deliver it, one thread at a time. Pressure arrived in subtle ways, wearing polite shoes. Deadlines turned from helpful guardrails into fences. Sleep shrank. Coffee expanded. Lists multiplied. She heard herself say yes before hearing the request. The machine sang, but the song felt a little faster. In the mirror, her eyes carried new shadows. Beauty lived there too, edged with something brittle. Success is not a bully, she told herself. Success is a tool, grip it gently. She wrote that on a sticky note and believed half. The journalist called, warm and curious again. "People need your story," she said, recording softly. "What do you need?" Came the second question. Linda paused longer than politeness recommends. "Space," she admitted, "to remember the why." They walked the shop while the recorder blinked red. Linda showed the hidden notes inside garments. She spoke about grief, resilience, ordinary miracles. The journalist nodded, asking fewer questions now. Sometimes listening is the bravest kind of writing. When the door closed, quiet widened the walls. Linda exhaled a breath she hadn't noticed holding. On the table, a single appointment card waited. Custom memory dress. It read in careful ink. The name beneath it trembled like a candle flame. The woman arrived with a box and a silence. She set it down as if placing a heartbeat. "I brought his shirts," she whispered, staring away. "Could you make a dress from them for me?" Grief filled the room without raising its voice. Linda lifted the lid and met a small universe. Flannel that smelled faintly of pine and winter, a faded concert tee, a cuff stained by motor oil, buttons scratched by years of living well. Each fabric square held a pulse of memory. They planned the silhouette slowly, like prayer. A soft line, pockets deep enough for tissues, collar from the flannel, sleeves from the tee, a secret patch over the hearts, stitched by hand, everything chosen with ceremony and breath. When the woman left, Linda stood very still. Tears slid, not dramatic, but necessary and honest. She threaded the needle with the color of mercy. The pedal met her foot as if bowing. The machine became a gentle instrument of ritual. Hours blurred into a litany of careful choices. She preserved a frayed edge where a laugh once lived. Aligned stripes so conversations would continue straight. Hid a tiny star inside the pocket seam. Sewing became translation from love to fabric. On fitting day, the woman looked at the mirror. Her hands rose to her throat, trembling, astonished. "I can feel him," she said, not smiling, not crying. Something softer than both entered the room. Silence applauded, and the dress breathed back. After she left, Linda sat on the floor. The carpet pressed marks into her tired legs. Work had never felt more like calling than now. Purpose lifted her like a hand beneath her ribs. She reached for the lamp and kept creating. The sign appeared to doors down overnight. A sleek logo, a window dressed in mimicry. On mannequins stood designs she recognized as hers, threads of her ideas trimmed into other hands. Anger rose, hot and articulate, behind her teeth. Inside, a young team moved with caffeinated precision. They greeted customers with practiced warmth and speed. Hashtags glittered on little price tags like bait. They sold the look, not the story, not the soul. Linda watched, then walked away before words escaped at home. She folded frustration into a small square. She placed it beside the machine like a warning. Copycats could chase the shape but miss the marrow. Authenticity is an accent forged by living. She would speak more clearly in her own tongue. All night she sketched pieces that could not be copied. Garments with secret pockets for notes of courage. Seams that mapped local tide lines, stitched in blue. Lining printed from handwritten letters of volunteers. A signature hand-embroidered mark. A quiet phoenix. She invited her Sunday circle to co-create. They brought stories, sketches, scraps with history. Fisherman's rope, church ribbons, theater curtain, fringe. The workshop felt like a choir practicing truth. Harmony returned, louder than competition's drum. Opening day of the new line was small and luminous. A chalkboard read, "Made with who we are." Customers traced seams with reverent fingertips. Some cried, some laughed, some stood very still. The room learned to hold that much feeling. Sales climbed, but something deeper climbed with them. Belonging turned into a verb, into practice, into place. The neighbor shop lowered prices and grew louder. Linda didn't follow. She deepened instead. Roots, not fireworks, would carry her forward. She cleared one wall and built a long table, not for display, but for gathering and learning. A sign above it read, "Open bench, open hearts." On Tuesdays, classes filled with women in transition. Hands shook at first, then steadied into possibility. They learned hems, zippers, and the art of undoing. They learned to rip seams gently, without shame. They learned that mistakes are teachers in cotton coats. Coffee and lullabies of machines stitched community. Laughter anchored the corners, so nothing blew away. The new collection honored these shared histories. Each piece carried a story tag, handwritten by its author. Some told of shelters, some of sobriety, some of dawn. Wearing them felt like walking in company. Fashion turned from spectacle into sanctuary. Local press returned, softer, better prepared to listen. They filmed hands, not faces, at the maker's request. The footage carried the hum of ordinary bravery. Viewers sent donations of fabric and time. Impact measured itself in names learned by heart. Linda hired 2 apprentices from the Tuesday class. She paid fairly, insisted on lunch breaks and music. They debated thread weights like poets, argue vowels. The shop moved at the pace of dignified work. Satisfaction lingered in the air like citrus and cotton. At night, with the benches empty, she exhaled. The room glowed the way rooms do after worship. She remembered the offer she had once declined, not with bitterness now, but with confirmed peace. No factory could manufacture this kind of quiet. She locked up, stepping into a salt-sweet breeze. Streetlights wore halos in the humid air. Somewhere, a saxophone practiced patience and blue notes. She walked home slowly, seams aligned with horizon. Tomorrow would ask for more. She was ready. Years later, the doorbell still chimed like morning. The walls held framed notes from people who healed. Photographs of early days sat in humble frames. The machine had been serviced, but still bore scars. So did Linda, and both worked beautifully. She wrote a letter to the woman she had been. "Dear Linda, at 50, you kept going." It began. "You thought failure was forever. It was weather. You learned to forecast by listening to breath. You discovered that mending is a way of seeing." She paused, then added a line she had earned. "Rebuilding isn't returning. It's composing a new song. Some notes are old, most are freshly brave. Play them in public, in kitchens, in workshops. Teach others the chorus until it belongs to them." The apprentices laughed in the next room. Busy, someone tried an unfamiliar stitch and whooped. A customer read a story tag and went quiet. The bell rang again, announcing ordinary miracles. Life, measured in garments, kept perfect time. Before closing, she lifted the original sleeve. Sunlight made it translucent. A chapel window. She stitched it into a banner above the bench. Words in blue thread read, "Begin again here." Every student touched it like a friendly compass. Night fell, kind and uncomplicated, over Port Harmony. Gulls tucked their arguments into the harbor. The shop exhaled the day and dimmed its lamps. Linda locked the door, pocketed purpose like keys. The The street answered with the hush of belonging. Walking home, she felt the city breathing with her. Old fear had thinned into a useful thread. Hope had become muscle memory, steady and warm. She smiled at the horizon's quiet, stitched line. Tomorrow's fabric waited, ready for her hands.